Blake Lively and her lawyers have been caught doing exactly what they accuse everyone else of: twisting narratives, silencing critics, and misrepresenting reality. And once again, the receipts don't lie. So let's get into this latest disaster. Because if you thought Blake's subpoenas against content creators were over the top, this new court filing proves her legal team has now graduated to a new level. Cherry-picking Justin Baldoni's private conversations and splicing them to look like damning proof against him. Only problem? The full context reveals it was never about her at all. The quote her attorneys highlighted looks bad on paper. It reads, "Baldoni, this is an incredible post from someone we have worked with on Man Enough. He nailed it as it was my exact intention. Abel, let's boost this instead of you posting it. I know the video has nothing to do with it, but let's instead have third parties amplify instead of you right now." Blake's team dropped this like it was their golden ticket. They framed it as proof that Justin and his colleagues were celebrating a smear campaign, boosting a hit piece against her exactly as he intended. On its face, it sounds like Justin was scheming, right? That's exactly the story her lawyers wanted the court and the public to believe. But the truth? The video Justin was talking about had nothing to do with Blake Lively, not a single thing. It was a video honoring victims, a piece meant to bring awareness. The issue came when Jen Abel pointed out that the comments under the original post were criticizing Colleen Hoover for romanticizing domestic violence. They didn't want Justin resharing it because it could be misinterpreted as him taking a swipe at Hoover. So instead, they suggested amplifying it in a different way, boosting the message without attaching his name to it. Take a look at it.
We need to talk about It Ends With Us, because I just saw a viral video with over 150,000 likes, and I'm wondering if my favorite aspect of this film almost did too good of a job, and I fear some people are missing the point, or rather they're stumbling right into it, and this conversation about DV is far too important not to get. My name's Brendan, and I'm a PhD researcher specializing in men and emotions, and I teach psychology courses. I'm going to try to keep spoilers here to a minimum, but there are some, as I will be discussing domestic V, specifically a type of it called intimate partner V. I have no clue what I'm allowed to say on here or not. When IPV comes up in this movie, it puts the audience in the psyche of the main character, and has you first feeling confused and unsure about what just happened, which is so powerful because it's so psychologically accurate to so many survivors' experiences. Broadly speaking, there's two distinct psychological defense mechanisms that people have in response to trauma and abuse that are relevant here: suppression and dissociation. Suppression is considered a conscious process, we think about it, whereas dissociation is an automatic response, where the individual isn't consciously aware of it. These survival and defense mechanisms can make it extremely difficult for survivors to acknowledge or even remember everything that happened during instances of IPV. First, let's talk about suppression. When someone that we love acts in a way that is so antithetical to what love is, like through abuse and violence, that discrepancy creates profound cognitive dissonance. And one way that our psyche tries to resolve that is to rationalize or downplay it. So maybe, oh, that was an accident, right? Or they didn't really mean that. Or, you know what, I'm at fault. My partner's behavior totally makes sense. I made them upset. Because sometimes we would rather blame ourselves than acknowledge that someone that we love is abusive towards us. So now let's look at dissociation, which is more like our conscious mind has left the chat and has had to disconnect from our bodies in order to escape the trauma. Our bodies still hold the trauma memories, but our ability to cognitively recollect the events are reduced because dissociation significantly impacts memory function. There's no way to tell in the film how much of Lily's response is suppression versus dissociation, but it doesn't really matter because IPV often involves a mixture of both responses. This film's ability to make the audience question the IPV is one of the best portrayals of these defense mechanisms that I've ever seen communicated on screen. I think the film made it quite clear by the end what happened, but if you left the theater still feeling some level of uncertainty as to the extent of the abuse, or find yourself rationalizing some of it, I think that in itself is so important to recognize and speaks volumes as to the cognitive dissonance that people have towards fully grasping the psychological scope of domestic V. And sadly, too many survivors of IPV are very familiar with these type of rationalization responses. If you watch the film, I'd love to know your thoughts on this, especially if you are a survivor, or if you read the book, I'm curious how different it's portrayed there. And to all past and current survivors of IPV, it's not your fault. You didn't deserve any of it, you don't deserve it, and you're not alone. There's organizations that you can reach out to for support if it's safe to do so.
That's it. No smear, no scheme, no gotcha, just basic PR caution. And yet, Blake's attorneys stripped it of all context and dropped it in the filing as if it was proof of his so-called harassment campaign. And this is where I draw the line. I don't even think you can call this cherry-picking anymore. Cherry-picking means you left out some details to make yourself look better. This is altering the facts. It's taking a conversation about honoring victims and twisting it into evidence of a smear campaign. That's not advocacy, that's misinformation. And it's exactly why people don't trust Blake's narrative of events. If you had real evidence, if you had actual proof, you wouldn't need to splice, edit, and misrepresent. The moment you resort to cutting and twisting words to fit your story, you've already lost. Now, let's zoom out, because this isn't just about one quote. This is a pattern. Over and over again, Blake's legal team has leaned on subpoenas, discovery dumps, and now cherry-picked exhibits to silence critics and sway perception. When content creators called her out, what did she do? She subpoenaed them, demanded their private information, and dragged them into court. Not because their opinions were defamatory, but because she didn't like that they challenged her version of events. That's not justice. That's intimidation. That's abuse of the system. And you'll notice something about those subpoenas. They didn't go to the big names. They still haven't messed with the heavy hitters like Megyn Kelly or Billy Bush, people with platforms too big to bully. Instead, they went after small creators, women on YouTube, people who don't have millions to fight back. That's not brave. That's punching down. Which brings us to Ryan Reynolds. Because let's be real, Blake's name is on the filings, but Ryan's shadow is all over this. Ryan built his entire career on fooling people into thinking he's a nice guy who just happens to play sarcastic assholes. Breaking news, he is an asshole who got rich being himself and acting like a nice guy. My opinion, no Baldoni funds received. His brand has always been about control. Controlling his image, controlling the narrative, controlling the punchline. And doesn't it look suspiciously familiar that Blake's legal tactics line up perfectly with the kind of reputation management Ryan has mastered in Hollywood? Ryan is the guy who will crack a joke on camera to make you forget the power play happening behind the scenes. But here, the mask is slipping. Finally, people are starting to see him not as the funny guy with the self-deprecating charm, but as the manipulator who uses lawsuits and PR spin to crush anyone who crosses him. And in my opinion, just my opinion, this entire legal circus feels less about Blake's so-called harassment and more like Ryan moving pieces on the board to protect his brand and his marriage. Because think about it, if this was really about harassment, why would her lawyers need to twist an innocent conversation into evidence? Why would they drag small creators through the mud instead of going after the big fish? Why would Ryan, a man worth hundreds of millions, be so invested in silencing creators on YouTube unless he felt the narrative slipping out of his control? To me, it doesn't add up. And that's why more people are whispering the same thing. Maybe this was never about Justin at all. Maybe this was about Ryan seeing the cracks forming, watching the pattern repeat, and deciding the best move was to destroy Justin's career before he could destroy their facade. I don't know the truth. None of us do. But the way this looks, it doesn't scream harassment, it screams panic. It screams desperation. It screams a ploy to slap a bandage on a marriage that already looks like it's circling the drain. And again, that's just my opinion. But when you look at the subpoenas, the intimidation tactics, the misinformation, and now this blatant twisting of evidence, it's hard not to see a pattern. Blake and her lawyers want you to believe this is about justice. To me, it looks a lot more like control, and nothing says guilty, like trying to silence people. So, what do you think? Is this about harassment, or is this about a marriage in freefall, two celebrities using the courts to rewrite reality and protect their brand? Because from where I'm standing, this isn't a case about right and wrong. It's a case about power, control, and manipulation. And the sad part is, the more they fight to keep the truth buried, the more obvious it becomes. This is all opinion and speculation, but I'll leave you with this. If Blake and Ryan had real evidence, they wouldn't need to twist words, bully creators, and weaponize subpoenas. They'd just show it. But they don't. And until they do, the public isn't buying it. So if you're tired of seeing powerful celebrities abuse the system to silence regular people, do me a favor, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and let's keep this conversation alive. Because Blake's team calls this crap discovery, but all I see is them discovering new ways to embarrass themselves.